Hello, everybody. Welcome to Between the Lines. My name is John Lofton here. Sorry, no intro music today, but we're still working at a couple little kinks this week. But it's better that we at least have a show, unlike last week. And I do apologize. On Sunday, I was not feeling the best, and therefore I was not able to do a show. And I meant to try to do at least a recorded one, earlier this week to make up for that, but it just did not happen. So, such is the life when you're like the host, owner, producer, and yeah, you kind of do everything. And so, when you're not available, sometimes there's just not a show. So, but I'm really happy to be here today. We have a very, very good topic that we're going to be talking about. You guys probably liked my content from last week, or 2 weeks ago, I should say. Very passionate about Christians and that kind of point of view. If you missed it and you want to see me get kind of fired up, go back and watch that show. And this week might be the same, just depending. I to be honest with you guys, like I write down bullet points. So in front of me, I have a screen and it shows me kind of what I'm thinking about and what I plan to talk about. And I even have a clock in front of me today. So my wife, producer, also doesn't have to cue me. I should be able to look down, be able to see the time nice and big. So you guys see me, and I get to see a whole lot of other stuff. So we're gonna see how well this works. She's taking care of our kid today, so that we can be, more quiet and not have any interruptions and all that. So I definitely appreciate her doing that. Nevertheless. But this week we're going to be talking quite a bit about police, law enforcement, and some stuff, obviously, with what's going on with yet a second police officer involved shooting up in Minnesota, and really what it's doing with our society and this whole public perception of police and law enforcement in general. And so I hope to share my perspective on, kind of how I see law enforcement and tell you why I think that way. And then even then at the end of the show, if you don't agree with me, at least you'll know how I think. And I do that in such a way so that maybe you be open-minded to see how other people think. So if you actually hear somebody out and hear their line of logic and thinking, perhaps it will help you with your logic and thinking as well. So, okay. Well, let's go ahead and dive in today. I don't have a ton of visuals today. But I hope just hearing the stories will kind of inspire you a little bit and get you thinking this week, throughout the week, Anyway, all right, here we go. Okay, so when I was a kid, I tell a lot of stories from when I was a kid because I really do think that they have a huge impact on how we perceive the world later on and where our morals and our standards of right and wrong kind of derive from. So, but when I was younger, I was part of the Big Brothers and Big Sisters program as a kid in Memphis, and I was matched up with a police officer for the city of Memphis, and I got to do sort of a ride along with him, kind of unofficially, at least ride around in his cop car, and it was really cool. And I really enjoyed that opportunity to get to have. And one time even brought me into the police station's kind of armory room where they keep all their guns and stuff like that. And I mean, yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot of weapons in there. And he was, first and foremost, very cautious, very careful to make sure that, I wasn't touching something or doing something that I shouldn't have. But yet, in at least back then, it was really kind of, seen as this is what the police need to do their job. And that was kind of instilled into me as a kid. Now, even at that young age, I understood that those guns were very dangerous and, could hurt somebody if misused and mishandled. You fast forward today, even I have a gun, I got just a cheap DPMS AR-15, and I keep it in a case most of the time. I hope I never have to use it except for, sport, or, target practice and stuff like that. That's really my main reason for having a gun. And that's my Second Amendment right. That's I'm a law-abiding citizen. I have nothing, precluding me from owning a firearm. Haven't committed a felony. I, pay my taxes. I don't know what else to say. And Iowa, of course, as you know, just passed this. Where you don't need a permit to have a to carry a handgun, and that goes into effect July 1st this year. And so I'm interested to see how that's going to play out. If it's really going to make a difference, if we're going to have a lot more people carrying guns, does it affect the supply in any way that Iowa now has this law? What's law enforcement's response going to be? Are we going to see more incidents where deadly force had to be used, or are we going to see the same or less? I guess time will tell. This is a kind of a landmark kind of moment in Iowa's evolution here of laws and Second Amendment rights and interpretations of that. And so it's just, I guess off and on, guns have always just sort of been there, but I've always recognized their importance. I've always recognized their lethalness, and you handle them with respect. The first time I got to go out and shoot a gun was with a good friend of mine who happened to be a former, I guess, military cop. He guarded a base and he carried a weapon and all that. And so he never used it. He never had to, but he had to do all the practicing and the training. And he's the one who actually showed my wife and I the proper way to shoot, and went out with us and helped us buy our first gun. I don't know, not quite a decade ago, but a long while ago. And I remember when I went in, this was a sports shop locally, and I remember going in, had to have my driver's license or my ID, I guess, and give all my information, submit it for a background check. And the funniest thing happened that day. You guys might get a kick out of this. So I was with our friend, and he was going to buy a gun that day too. And they actually approved me to buy the gun that same day. Sometimes there's a 3-day waiting period, just depends on the processing of it and everything. But that day there was, for me, I got it. I bought the gun the same day. Interesting enough, my friend, who is, a current member of the National Guard, and also, like I said, used to be a military cop as one of his jobs. When he tried to buy a gun, they actually made him wait 3 days to be able to buy the gun before his background check came back. And that was really, really interesting to me that, hey, here's a guy who's never bought a gun before, ever, and I got to walk out the same day. And so could guns fall into the wrong hands? Sure. What if I was a crazy nut job who never had committed a felony before, but I was still a crazy nut job, and then I go out and kill somebody and I got it, Could we have stopped that? No. I strongly don't think we could, because think about it. How crazy is it? What are you going to do? You're going to go pass, I don't know, a polygraph test that says you're not going to go out and kill somebody? Is that what we're going to need to do just to protect ourselves and protect our country? I don't know. But going back to police, I know I got off track on guns, but I guess that's kind of the reason we call law enforcement into question, is because of their use of force. And was a lethal use of force justified? And each case is different. And I am not law enforcement. I've had many encounters. In fact, I know a local sheriff here in Iowa, one of Iowa's counties here. I'm not going to give too specifics because privacy and everything. And the point is, the stories that he could tell me, and I got the chance to talk to them a few times now. But the stories that he got to tell me were just so shocking about what he sees. He told me about a car accident, and which case the person in that accident was so mangled, so disfigured, literally blood and everything, they literally almost had to scrape them off the pavement. Like, literally, they were just splattered. And I'm just thinking that is the most grotesque thing I have ever heard in my life. And yet somebody had to do that. And that was him, along with a bunch of, medics and first responders, I'm sure, and crime scene people. I can't. No, just even saying that out loud just absolutely blows my mind in a way like I'm not sure I could handle it. I'm not sure if I would puke first or just stand there in shock of how is this possible? Like, this isn't a video game, right? This isn't something that you even see on YouTube or a movie. This is real life. Like, you literally could see someone like that. And how would you respond? And yet that's your job. And yet that's what law enforcement do. It's not every day, probably, but they still have to do that. How many times did a police officer, and I wonder, let's look at Derek Chauvin right now. Okay. How often did Derek Chauvin, maybe in his career, go and help somebody, go out of his way? And I'm not defending the actions that he took, obviously. I'm just merely saying about his past and not trying to compare it to what he did that day. But I'm not justifying it in any way, shape, or form. But what I'm saying is he made a mistake, right? A big one. I don't think he intended to kill anybody that day, but let's stay out of that. But what I think is he understood and had the training, but also there are other things that they have to be trained on to know what to do, in a broken down tire situation, just helping a domestic couple kind of deal with the situation at hand and get absolutely no thanks, no credit really for most of it. Most of it's hidden. You don't hear about it. And that's what bothers me is it's like when a police officer does something and it catches wind for the mainstream media and all of that, everybody assumes the worst about that cop. Everybody thinks that cop is a monster. In none of these cases do I genuinely think that was that law enforcement officer's goal that day, is to kill anybody. In fact, I think they probably do 99.9999999% a lot of good. But that one incident now defines them. And it's wrong. And yes, if they are found guilty, they should pay the same penalties as anybody else who commits a murder or should not have reacted in that manner. And they should face all legal repercussions for it. But let's not paint them out as complete monsters. They have a job that requires them to make a very split-second decision. And growing up, I understood that. I've been in trouble with the law as a teenager. I was a very troubled youth, growing up. And I even assaulted a police officer once. And they could have charged me. They could have thrown the book at me. I know one incident, I was at a youth shelter because I was very violent with my mom, and I did not respect anybody, and when I was that age, about 14 or so. And it wasn't safe for me to be at home. They were still figuring out my behavioral issues, but I had some incidents with law enforcement even at the shelter. And, I had to do community service for one incident where I tore up a bunch of property, belligerent and all that, and almost got sent to basically juvenile prison. And the judge gave me a chance, like a second chance. And I look at that as, I know that the officers who had to deal with me on those incidents, yeah, they probably roughed me up a little bit more than what I would have appreciated. I remember them. I tried to squeeze around one at the shelter, and I think I tried to dive underneath his legs because I was in a bathroom. I had locked myself in, and I dove between his legs, and I remember he grabbed me by the shirt, yanked me up, threw me against the bathroom wall, and there went the cuffs. And I was like, oh, well, this is over. Because he's like 3 times the body weight of me as like a little 14-year-old. And was he rough with me? Yep. Should have seen the bruises on my wrists. You should have seen the bruises on my arms for about a week or so after that. But I kind of did it to myself. Think about it. If I would have just opened the door, had my hands up, went out, wouldn't have ended that way. And kind of leads me into what I want to talk about next is I had a conversation, and again, for privacy's sake, I'm not going to be horribly specific, but someone I know who's, you know, a really an advocate for the, you know, Black Lives Matter movement and police reform and all of that. And I had a very interesting conversation. And of course we disagreed, as you might imagine, but I listened, and I'll say her. I listened to her, and I tried to reconcile her thought process. I tried to understand why it was she was thinking the way that she did. And it derives from the same thing that, you know, I've heard a lot of other people who are advocates for it say that, you know, if let's use me for example. If I were black as a teenager and I did the same thing, would my treatment in that incident have been worse or the same? If I made the same choices as a African American black person at age 14, would my treatment have been different? And she was arguing, yeah, it would. That they go out every day, they live in fear that they're going to get harassed by the police, that they're going to get stopped, that they're going to face worse repercussions. And I do not want to get started on racial equality and all of that. That's a can of worms I'm still doing research with. I'm not going to do that in this. I'm going to keep this very closely related to the police and what they do and why we should respect them. And that was the thing. And I know that it comes from a lineage of that sort of inequality thinking about police and police mistrust, and how and how there is a genuine fear there for the police. But I also know that that isn't true for all black people, because I'm thinking in my mind, and this is just maybe me thinking, okay? But we have a lot of black African American police officers too. In fact, as a kid, the Boys and Girls Club thing, Big Brothers Big Sisters thing, the police officer that I was paired up with, or my big brother, if you will, he was black. Okay? So, and he treated me very well. So, but is it possible then for a black police officer to be biased against a white civilian? Would I get worse treatment? Does it work both ways, or is this just a one-way thing? And I was trying to think about that. And I know that I've been in trouble with the law, and I had some pretty hard consequences. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is I just can't see any police officer, black or white, wanting to treat somebody different because of their color of the skin. Because every police officer, black or white, that I've ever talked to would tell me that they just have a desire to serve their community and do what's right. Now we have these like unconscionable bias and stuff like that. But unconscionable bias doesn't override our rule of right and wrong. It can affect the perceived danger in a situation. But I think that all officers are trained to do the best job that they can in the situation. And if you're a teenager carrying around a BB gun that looks like a Glock, you're probably going to get treated as if you have a Glock. That officer doesn't know you. The officer doesn't know your intentions. They have no idea. All they know is it looks like you got a gun. And that police officer who just wants to serve their community has a family, probably a wife and kid at home. They're not looking to die today. They don't want to die because you're doing something stupid. So it comes down to the same thing we have to do, frankly, in war. If you're going to kill me, I got to kill you first, frankly, for self-preservation. And these officers understand that risk, that they could end up in that situation every day they go to work. Every day they put on the uniform. Every day they put on their belt. They understand that that can happen. Their families have to deal with that can happen when they get called out at 1 a.m. in the morning. Because like it or not, there are bad people in this world who do bad things. And our police are frankly the only way we can maintain order instead of anarchy. So another little conversation, and by the way, today's episode is probably going to go over 30 minutes. Because I still have a lot to say here and I don't want to miss any of it. I hope one day I can actually get that sheriff I was talking to you about on the show to do an interview. Because I really would like to interview a cop. And have these same questions for them. So you can hear it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. But we'll see. But if you're the cop and you're just dealing with the situation, sure, could there be a little bit? But when it comes to actually having to use lethal force, I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter black or white. I think that in that moment, it's okay, my training's kicking in. I don't want to kill you, but if you do something wrong right now, I might have to kill you, kind of thing. And when they aim to kill, from what I understand, that most officers aren't just looking to shoot one bullet. That whole clip's probably going to be empty. And it's sad because somebody did something stupid. And what usually underlies this is somebody didn't listen to the police's orders. Which brings me into my other point here that I had the conversation. I said, we're talking about the authority that police should have. And this girl I was talking to, she said, police serve us. We shouldn't be afraid of them. Okay, let's talk about serving. Yes, they serve you, but they serve me just as much. Okay, and when it comes to accountability and having a civilian review board, a civilian review board are not lawyers. They are not trained, maybe not all of them anyway, on lethal force. And it tends to skew a little bit of a political spectrum. Law enforcement should not be political, for one thing. So just because you have a certain viewpoint of police officers doesn't mean that that viewpoint by this other group should apply to everybody. You may have an ideology about what police should be and do, but that's not how our laws are set up. Police are set up to serve the community by enforcing the laws and assisting the community, but they are not there as human resource people. That's not a police officer's role. Now, a lot of times they get thrown into those situations with domestic disputes and mental health issues and medical issues that they're the first ones on the scene with, but that they're not human resource people. They are there to diffuse the situation as quickly as possible to preserve the lives not only there but of the neighbors and surrounding community. That is their job. And they sign up to do that. And they are to carry out the law to the best of their ability, to the letter. But that's where laws get interpreted. Our legislation, judges make those decisions. Our legislation body makes the laws, draws up the laws, and then it's up to judges to interpret the laws. It's up to law enforcement to identify when a law has been broken, and then to take the action, whether it's a speeding ticket or arresting somebody with an outstanding felony warrant. It's their job. They have to follow the law. And they do get a little bit of gratitude. Think about the times you should have gotten a speeding ticket, but they let you off with a warning. Hopefully at least one of you guys has that happen. They kind of have a little bit of discretion. And so what I'm saying here is that police officers' job is primarily to protect the community at large, and as well as just to enforce the laws. But I don't think any officer wakes up and wants to have an altercation. They're not happy being a part of a riot mob scene. And the thing is a lot of those, riots and stuff that happen, they are far outnumbered. And so, yeah, they need some extra gear to kind of level the playing field. And the other point that this person brought up to me was how police were the aggressors at some of these riots and protests. So being an aggressor would mean that it would have to be unprovoked first, like they took the first swing or took the first action. And at least in her perspective, she said she saw instances where that was the case. Okay. So if it's true, then of course it's wrong, right? We can all get on board with that. Police should not be the aggressors when there hasn't been a action taken against them or an action that affects another person first. But at the same time, how much of the incident did she see? When did she see it? Did she understand the other factors that were going on? Was there something else that officer had going on? Could she accurately reflect of exactly what happened in that scene? Well, now we have body cams. We never used to have body cameras, and now a video can tell a very interesting story, but that video camera only sees a certain angle. And a lot of times it's jarring around, moving around, and you're trying to freeze frame it to capture key moments in the altercations. And it can look as though the officer was in the wrong or the aggressor. And I'll get into some other things that happen with videos, especially once they get out to the public at large. But I'm going to save that for a little bit here. So that's all they see. That's all that really gets submitted to court along with other eyewitness accounts. But again, it's hard and sometimes dang near impossible to truly say that that officer had no reason or justification for using the force that they did and or the reasons for the applying that force. It gets really tough. And so that's kind of where this whole thing of qualified immunity, I think, kind of drew from. You probably heard that term a lot in the news lately. And what that really is saying is, this officer has to be allowed a little bit of leeway because unlike the rest of us who can run away from a situation, they're the ones running towards a situation. And giving them the freedom of being able to do their job and protect themselves and giving a little bit more latitude when they have to use deadly force maybe isn't such a bad thing. I mean, put yourself in their position. Come on. And the only one who can really tell us that is, well, Derek Chauvin. Now, he chose to not testify in his trial, which I'm sure his attorneys evaluated the risks and the benefits of doing that and probably advised him not to. Okay, that's his choice. It's called pleading the fifth. That's exactly what that means. My perspective is, if that were me, yeah, I'd want to testify and I'd tell that prosecution exactly why I thought maybe I needed to do that. But that's just me. But it can backfire. You could say something or have them walk you into a little bit of a confession. And of course, you're on the stand. You can't lie. Right? So what's the best solution? Well, in all these cases that get hyped up, just listen to the police officer. The other argument this gal and I had was, well, if I have to go to jail and get arrested and I've got all these fees and I miss work, I could get fired and all of that. If it goes on your permanent record, this, that, and the other. Yeah, you're right. But if that officer is actually wrong, let it come out in court. And I told her, I said, do you really think that this officer is just going to stop doing what they're doing because you're yelling at them to not do it? Is that really the best place in the heat of that moment? Again, where he's thinking about protecting his life at the end of the day, going home to his kids while still putting himself in danger, trying to do a job to the best of his ability. Could he make mistakes? Yes. Can happen. But at the same time, I would argue that you yelling at them is not going to change the situation. It's only going to make it worse. If they are found to have used, excessive force or not have handled the situation to code, you can take that up into court, have a lawsuit of your own, and then that officer can face discipline actions, termination, or criminal charges, depending on the situation. But I would always argue that police have to be allowed authority. And some people in, I would say minority groups especially, seems to be where we think that this comes from, is the fear that the police are just going to hurt us and they should be afraid of the police. And that's why they run. They were scared. I mean, you probably hear that a lot if you ever watch Cops. I was just scared. I got nervous. Okay. Well, how scared and nervous are you be when that dog comes to bite your leg off? That's pretty scary. If you run, they got a canine, or they tackle you, that's probably going to hurt a whole lot more. If you're worried about your personal safety, I would argue that you probably have a better chance of just letting the officer do his job. If he has to put you in custody, take you to jail, at least you're going to be safe. You're going to go home. You're not going to die. You're not putting yourself at risk of dying because, again, that officer is making a split-second decision. They don't have time to ask you, hey, are you about to kill me? Or do you have a gun in you, like where I can take care of this right now? No, they see you running, and they may not have a chance to search to make sure that you're safe and they are safe. So in that moment, that officer may have to make that unfortunate decision. It's regrettable. However you feel about the police, trying to police the police, as it were, in a heat of a moment is not going to end well. One other argument they had was, at these protests, they said that they, were told to leave when it was their protest and they were on public property, and that. Okay. Let's think about this. If you were on property, I know most cities have a form that you fill out, and it's just to say that I'm going to be here and we're not going to cause trouble. We just want to protest and have that. And it lets them know, so in case law enforcement knows about it ahead of time, they can kind of prepare. But since when does protesting involve you getting in the street and blocking a highway, or you know, you know, having tear gas into another officer and all of that? And I would say, even if you're not physically hurting an officer, they and this new law that Iowa just passed, they made it a crime to shoot a laser in an officer's eye. If you are shooting a laser in an officer's eye, are you really in danger in that moment? Or are you actually preventing them from taking care of themselves and somebody else? Oh, not to mention that you could put an eye out with that and cause them blindness. Let me tell you about blindness. That sucks. I know. I deal with having a visual impairment. Say that I could equally see what they could see. I don't know. So I've always given them a little leeway. And they get taunted at, abused. They just have to put up with so much. And for a lot of it, they're quiet about it. They're holding the line. You got a bunch of officers all standing in line, and yeah, they got riot gear. Like I said earlier, they're probably outnumbered. They don't know how many of you there are. All they know is they got to try to maintain peace. So that means they need some tools that are more advanced than what you have with your rocks and bottles. And once a situation gets out of hand, meaning someone threw a rock or someone threw a bottle and now there is altercations, it's going to be a whole lot easier for another officer who's next door to the other one who just got hit with a bottle to have to go and push somebody or use a baton or whatever the case may be, whatever force that they feel like they need to do, because they just saw one of their other officers get hit with something. And while they may not have gotten hit, maybe they felt like they needed to because they felt it was imminent that you were about to do something if you're the one that's next to throw a bottle, or you don't know which way it's going to go. That's my point. Officers, when they are hired, are thoroughly screened for background check. They have to go through the police academy. They have to have so many certifications and all of that. And for what? I think some cities pay their cops like $35,000 or $40,000 a year. It can go up to like $55,000, I think, for like an average salary for a police officer. And yet they're the ones putting them in danger. You can make that much money sitting in a corporate office as a manager somewhere, right? And yet that's all those guys make, and yet it could cost them their life. What I'm saying is police officers need to be given more latitude dealing with the situation, because if we didn't have police to be able to make those split-second decisions, think how many more police officers might die. Think how many more people in the community might die or be seriously hurt or injured. In war, you don't want to have to kill anybody, but sometimes we have this domestic war situation where things are going to get out of hand. And when they say disperse, it's because they feel it is imminent that things are about to get into a situation where a lot of people are going to get hurt. It isn't to try to prevent you from having a protest or a riot. It is to protect you and your people around you from having a bad situation, because it's very clear that things are starting to escalate. Come back another day and do it again. Come back in a smaller group. Do it again. Go talk to your legislation, your city council. Go talk to a judge. Go actually talk to a police officer. Go talk to the community resource officers in your district. When something doesn't seem right, go read court documents. Go read the disclosures. But don't try to enforce a police reform in the middle of a traffic stop. Just do what the officer says, and even if they're wrong, let it come out. Have an attorney, and then sue the city for the cost if they're found wrong. I know it doesn't seem perfect, and you're probably right. Maybe if that officer is wrong, that situation shouldn't have happened to you in the first place. If they did truly pull you over because of race, if they pulled you over because of some underlying factor, and you felt like it was petty and that the outcome was more than it should have been, yeah, it stinks. And I hope that officers are held accountable even for those minor infractions. They need to be perfect. and they're expected to be perfect 100% of the time, because mistakes like thinking you have a taser when you have a gun. I was watching a video from another YouTube channel, Officer 401. If you guys don't watch him, you totally should. He's a cool dude out from Georgia, and he just, it's so cool to hear his reaction as a cop in some of the situations. And he commented on that recent incident, and he said, yeah, a Glock weighs, I think he said like 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds, and a taser barely even weighs a pound with a cartridge in it. And on top of that, you can't just pick out your taser and just fire it. You have to turn it on, I think he said, and like charge it, and it shows like a percentage of battery level and all that. So a taser takes longer to fire than a Glock, is basically what he was saying. So in this second incident up in Minnesota, yeah, there's a lot of things that officer did very wrong. And if she truly meant to shoot her taser, she should have fired her taser. I know I mentioned maybe she didn't spend her entire time on the force, doing street duty. She could have had more of an administrative role for a lot of her career. I don't really, if that part doesn't matter. A firearm, it should be one of those things like you're heavily trained in knowing what to do, where it is. He talked about how most departments have it so that your lethal weapon, your Glock and your firearm are like on your right side. So for me, I'm right-handed, would be on my right side, and then the taser is on your weak side, which for me would be my left side. So that way you have, I think you call it a cross draw. And again, I'm really excited as I do the show, and I'm thinking now, I'm really thinking about contacting this sheriff that I know and see if he'd be willing to sit down with us. But yeah, I just, man, I hope that this whole thing kind of settles down. But these riots and protests that are getting out of hand, they're not really helping cops to settle down and start to be more reactive. Or less reactive, or being able to handle situation. It just, I would maybe argue maybe a lot of them feel like, and again, I shouldn't speak too much for them, but I think a lot of them just kind of feel like they're gonna have to be more on edge because their freedom depends upon it. But as a community, I would hope that we can start to look at police officers as a position of high respect, because they're doing a job that most people frankly don't have the galls to do. Just think about that, people. Blue lives matter. That's why I showed that, and something I don't talk too much about, you guys don't get to see it very often, but on my wall, I have, stand for the flag, kneel for the cross, and then I'm a Blue Lives Matter. Above that, I've got these are all stickers, by the way. But above that, I have another picture that has a cross with kind of American flag kind of highlighted in it. And then I have a American flag that has like little, I don't know, little tiny pictures of like guns on it. I don't know. I do come from that mindset of belief in these privileges of having the Second Amendment, in these privileges that cops and police and law enforcement are vital to our society and our they're super critical to our infrastructure. They're the first line of defense. They're the ones who will come out and help you. And let's try to remember all the positive things that police officers do for us. And I encourage everybody to please respect your police. They are doing a job that is incredibly tough. And they, some cops made a mistake. And to the minority groups who still feel like it's hard to trust the police, well, just try to put yourself in their position and try to make better decisions. If you're a parent of a minority child and you're having to have conversations with them because of your experience with law enforcement and how hard it was, then I would say try to tell your kids that it's just better to listen to the police officer and then sue the department later if they're wrong. Otherwise, if they are doing something wrong, recognize it, that there's a reason that they got in trouble. There's a reason that they went to jail. And you need to own it. Police officers, I would argue, do not apply the law any differently to any one person based on race, sex, religion, or any other protective class. I think that if you are constantly surrounded by drugs because of poverty, work your butt off to get out. Make smarter decisions. If you've had drug abuse or something like that in the past, go to counseling. I don't know. It is hard for me to relate to you on that level, maybe. But I gotta believe where there's a will, there's a way to get out of those situations. Tell your kids, don't join a gang. Don't get involved with all that. Study hard, go to college. Minority groups have like the NAACP and advocates like that. There's a ton of minority advocates. And if there's a disparaging rate, yeah, I get it. But I don't think it's the police that are causing that. I think it is a socio-economic disparity. And if we can fix that as a community, as a country, I feel like we could have a much more even keel when it comes to crime and poverty and all that. But everybody has to make that decision. You have to make that decision that I'm just going to do what I got to do, serve my time, move on, and make better decisions. I'm teaching my kid the same thing. If he sees a police officer, show respect. If you show respect, you'll get respect back. If you talk to them in a calm manner without trying to escalate the situation, it's probably going to end better. So that's all I got for today, folks. We will see you guys next week. I have some really cool ideas for shows coming on down the line, and I hope that you guys will tune in next week. Stay tuned. We have a lot more coming. I am working on the channel, getting it done. I am just being slow and thoughtful about this whole process. So, all right, guys, take care. It was been a pleasure hanging out with all of you guys, and we'll see you next week. I'm John Lofton for Between the Lines.